Hey.
Hey.
Hey. Okay, so the other day, literally last night, we made a video and Cole just said two things and I kind of not fixated on them, but I was like, okay. And then I didn't really think much of it. I talked to God about it for a second. And then I kind of just vanished from it. And then today, I was sitting in church and it was during praise and worship. After I got my spiritual spanking. And so I was like, oh, okay. And it's like, oh, yeah, we should probably address that. So in the video yesterday, Cole said, we don't do this for ritual. And I was like, we made a relationship. We made a video about having a relationship with God and what that looks like and what that means. But I just kind of wanted to clarify, it's so important to do those things, but not let them become a ritual or a checklist. It is important. The first thing you do when you wake up is pray, put your eyes on the Bible, because that kind of sets course for your whole day. If you wake up and you instantly start screaming at your kids, your whole day is probably going to be off the charts crazy. It kind of just sets the course for the day, and that's why we do it. And yeah, it really is easy to be well, I checked this. But that's the importance of having a relationship with God, is it doesn't become a checklist. It becomes so much more. It becomes, I want to do this because I know it makes a difference in my life. And it's the simple things of going to church, giving, serving. Sometimes you're I'm going to say there are days where I'm I feel I'm walking through the motions and I have to snap myself out of it. I'm you're doing this for more than this. The other day I was reading my Bible and it was a bunch of different Psalms that we were doing that day. And I read them and I was I did not get a single thing out of that. And so I had to stop, pray, and reread them. And I was that's how I make sure it doesn't become a ritual, is I'm okay, am I actually reading this to absorb something? Or am I reading this and just being well, did that, let's start praying. And one thing that we kind of do to stay out of that ritual norm is we go, I just totally went blank-minded. I don't even know what I was going to say. I just totally went blank. Do you have anything to say about ritual?
Don't let it become something that,
You can clearly tell that we've been up since 5:50 this morning. So anyways.
Don't let it become don't get stuck in the motions. Do it because you want to do it.
Yeah. And
if you don't like doing it, change it.
Yeah, if you don't like the way you're doing it.
If you're getting burnt out at church, you're serving, you're volunteering, you're helping out, and it just starts dragging you down and you're not feeling energized when you do it, ask to try another position.
And if you're or honestly, sometimes it just takes taking a couple weeks off and just decompressing, because I know sometimes when you're in the mode of serving, you're I'm running here. And sometimes, honestly, you just need a break. I see so many pastors who are I take a month, not a month off. I take a week off every 6 months. And it just gives me a chance to decompress, because honestly, if your cup's not full and running over, you can't pour into others. And it's just simple, so simple. Just don't let it become a ritual. But the another thing that he said was that his grandfather did not serve church in four walls. And we heard that so many times. I've heard so many people tell me, well, I don't have to go to church. That's not where Jesus is. And
I don't need a building to worship.
Yeah, and I'm okay, that's great. But are you doing it? Are you actually turning on the worship music? Are you actually changing your atmosphere? And there's something about being in a building
surrounded by like-minded people
that is loving and at chasing after God that changes everything. Because, yeah, I've been to churches where I'm I should have just stayed home. I didn't get anything. And I've been to churches that are so on fire for God. I'm
You mean them churches we tried out when we first moved?
Yeah. And I remember just you try a church and it just sets your soul on fire and you get connected with like-minded people and you're wow, this changes things. And so we're going to give you a real life experience about how church can change you. Are you ready? Okay. So before we get started, do not come for my husband. He's a changed man since this event. That's me just staring down haters. Okay, so anyways, so go to the pandemic 2020. We get taken out of school and we finish college We go into summer break. Yeah, we finished the college semester. We go into summer break, and then I go into my last semester. And we finally get told, like, clearance to go back to college as normal, and with a mask on and just different rules. Well, we get to college, and they hand us this, like, 200-page playbook. And, I mean, you had to sign an agreement that you read it. You had to get tested before you moved in. I mean, there was all these rules and regulations. And then when you got there...
You had to check in every day. You had to take your temperature every day.
Yeah, it was
You had
crazy.
to wear a mask outside while you're on campus. But as soon as you leave, no mask requirement.
Yeah, it was crazy. And so we went, and you had this whole meeting if you lived in the dorms, which both of us did because we lived so far away from our house. And they stated, like, they just kind of drilled fear right there. Like, if you're caught without a mask, this is your punishment. I mean, it was just crazy, the fear tactics they were putting on us. And I was like, hey, let's go back to church. And so we drove out the 15 minutes to our church, and we got there, and we seen, it was not a small church, hundreds of people walking in without masks on. And so I texted one of my friends that went there, and I was like, hey, do y'all wear a mask at church? Because it was still a Kentucky mandate at that time. And she's like, no. And I was like, oh, okay. And so we were like, well... And, like, I mean, they would be like, well, if you get COVID, you're going to have to sit in quarantine for 14 days. And
we heard stories of, like, the...
people missing meals. Yeah. I mean, it was awful. So we were like, no, we don't want that. So we sat in our car and we watched church online. And so that's what we did every Sunday. We would go get breakfast in the cafe, go to our cars, and watch church online. And I just kind of was like, wow, this is the new norm. And I was like, this doesn't feel like church, but it's better than nothing. And that's kind of just a couple on what I read. It's better than nothing. And so, fast forward, I graduate, I start working for the college, and I tell Cole, I'm like, we go out on dates, we go to buildings, just listing things that we do, and I'm like, they've taken church away from us. Let's, like, jump back in. Because it was so easy for the fear, and I think that's kind of what Satan used that pandemic for, was, like, to see how many people could fall off. So we would go to our first church service, and we sit down, and Eric Gilbert's up there just preaching away, and I'm like, yes, I'm feeling it. And I look over, because Cole always sits on my right side, and I'm like, something is wrong with him. And I'll never forget what he was wearing that day. It was his denim blue jacket with the stickers all over it, your khaki pants. I will never forget this day. And I look over and I'm like, something's wrong. And so I get in the car and I'm like, what did you think about church? Because we always ask each other, what did you get out of today's message? What did you think about it? And he's like, it was good. And I was like, okay. And so drive a little bit further and I'm like, so what did you think about today's message? What did you get from it? I thought it was good. And then we'd always ask this question, do you feel like anything was speaking to you? And he was like, nope. And I was like, that was an immediate red flag for me because he always got something from church. And I was like, something's up. Ugh. And he would not tell me. And so the next day, I'm at work, he's in his dorm room, and I'm messaging him, and I'm like, hey, are you okay? Because I knew in my soul something was wrong. And I was like, I'm going to keep on. I don't care how much I have to badger him. I'm going to get this out of him. Like, that is my personality. And I know people are like, that's wrong. You should just let him be. I'm like, no, that's not what Jesus calls us to do. He never said, leave him alone.
Don't beat him up and interrogate him, but, like, pester him until...
Yeah, and so I was like, hey, I know something's up. So, like, we need to talk. And he's like, we'll talk after you get off work. And I was like, no, we won't. You can't send, we need to talk, and then just stop responding. I'm like, no, tell me now. And so he sends me this long text message. And I just sat there in disbelief reading this. And I'm like, what? So I close my office door and I call him. I'm like, are you serious? Because in the moment, it was such disbelief of what I was reading. And to say he fell off the wagon...
Understatement.
Was an understatement. Like, he fell off, been ran over, dragged down the road a little bit... And was still like, no, I don't need Jesus. And it was so crazy to me because he was doing the Bible studies with me. We were calling each other and praying. We were going to church. I was giving my tithe and offering. It was so crazy to me. And I was like, what? And I was like, we need to talk in person. So on my lunch break, like, let's meet and talk. And we always met for lunch. So that was not an out of the ordinary thing. But I remember this day, I had not even grabbed my lunchbox. I was so mad. And I literally had to start praying because I was like, Satan wants me to attack him. Satan wants me to instantly go in there and start making accusations. And Jesus wants me to meet with compassion. And I got to decide to meet him with compassion. No matter what he says, I got to decide to meet this man with compassion. And so I prayed up really hard. Like, I don't think I texted him after I called him. And I was like, I just need time to pray. And I prayed really hard. And I met him for lunch. And he didn't say a word. He just sat in his truck. And I was like, are you going to talk? I was like, because I really have nothing to say. And he was like, I don't know what to say to you. And I was just like, okay. And I was like, I love you. I will love you through this, but we need to have some serious conversations and just like seriously talk about some things. And it was in that moment that I looked at him and I said, we got to decide if we're going to make this work or if we're just going to cut ties and never speak again.
Mind you, in the middle of this, we had already booked our venue. We'd gone to the venue, booked it, booked the cake, ordered catering.
Booked a videographer. Well, I mean, we were...
Like, while we was having the conversation, I was putting stamps on the invitations.
Yeah. Like, we'd already mailed out half our invitations, but these were the other half that had to go out. And I was just like... in a million miles a minute, my mind is firing because I'm just that type of person. I'm very business oriented. So I was thinking in the business concept. And that's when God really got a hold of me. He was like, you got to look at this from like your religious aspect. Well, not your religious, but your Jesus aspect. And so I remember I went to work. I finished my day at work and I drove home and I decompressed. And then I messaged him and I said, you can come over. And I cooked dinner and I gave it to him and we ate, and I think it was one of our quietest meals I've ever had. And I remember I looked at him from across the table and I was like, this kid is broken with shame. This kid is absolutely shattered from shame. And I was like, what do you want to do? Because I wanted to know where he was before. Because I was like, at that point, my like wall just slammed up and my trust and faith in this boy just vanished. And I was like, we got to decide. And he was like, I want to make this work, but I don't know how. And I was like, well, don't worry. I got a game plan. And I was like, you need to do this. 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 And I was like, counseling. We need to put blockers on your phones. You need to get into a Bible verse. You need to find some good Christian men. And I just started listing things. And mind you, this was like April when he told me.
Couple months.
He left in May to go work for a summer internship. And I remember I looked at him like when he was going and stuff, and I said, you're going to go be a summer intern for a church? And I remember I was just, because I knew where he was standing in that moment. And I knew all the promises that he'd broken because I did give him a list of things. I was like, hey, this is things you need to do to help build trust back in us. And he didn't do some of them. And I was like, does he even want this? And I remember I would just always tell him, your actions are speaking louder than your words. And I kind of just was like, what the heck? And so one day, like right the day before he left, I think, I sat him down and we just had a conversation on my couches that I bought off Facebook Marketplace. And I was just like, why did it happen? I was like, I've been so busy trying to like fix it. Why did it happen? And he said, the honest truth is, I walked through the motions of Christianity from the time the pandemic hit until now. And I was like, oh. And it kind of dawned on me, like, I just kind of figured, because after you hang out with somebody so much and you love somebody so deeply, you just kind of like, they're in the same spot as me as Christianity. Like, and I was like, oh, of course he's a baby Christian. And then like the pandemic happened and we weren't allowed to be around each other. His mom worked in the medical field and like that summer, yeah, I was being a summer intern and that's what was crazy. In the pandemic summer, I was a summer intern. So we were going to church every Sunday in Louisville. And I was like, what happened? But it was that disconnect from August to December. And then he was like, it was so easy for Satan just to creep in because I didn't have that fellowship, that connection, that reliability that church gives you. Because it's like, you got to walk into a church door and like, yeah, you're bringing shame, you're bringing hurt, you're bringing guilt, you're bringing all that. But the nice thing is at church you can leave it. And he's like, I didn't have that. I didn't have, like, yeah, I had you holding me accountable and being like, hey, did you do your Bible today? Let's pray. Let's talk. He's like,
It was a checklist.
he's like, I knew you were not going through the motions. He's like, but I was going through the motions 100%.
I knew she was going to ask me about it, so I made sure it was done before you could ask me about it.
Yeah. And I was like, wow. And so, I mean, it took like getting down to the nitty gritty. And I mean, I was just like, and the truth is, nobody knows about that time in our lives. Nobody knows about from April until August when we got married, those months and what they were like, because we put on the perfect happy couple act. Like, we went to wedding showers and we might have just had like a knockout drag out in a sense. Like, we were not punching each other. We're not abusive or anything, but like, I would be like, I can't believe you. Because it's right when like we were about to have a big moment in our lives, Satan would throw it right up. And I was like, and it was so hard, him being 2 hours away from me and in a different time zone and us both working different shifts. I was like, it was one of the most trying times in our lives, honestly. Like, and we weren't even married yet. And I was like,
nope.
And I remember I looked at him like a week before our wedding, or I don't even think we saw, I don't remember. But I remember I seen him face to face. And I said, if we can make it through this, we can make it through anything.
Ta-da.
And we made it through. But honestly, the only way we made it through was getting him back in church. And him literally just saying, okay, I gotta understand that like what I did completely destroyed this person. And so like, it is something, honestly, we celebrate in this house. At 11 months after the last event happened, we bought a dog. We got a dog. And like,
I thought it was 23.
Mm-mm.
I thought it was almost,
No, you always think it is.
I have no idea.
And because we weren't married for 2 years yet, babe. And so it's on our calendar. If you come into our house, it's on our calendar. There's a month with a number in front of it, and it's a date, and it goes on the calendar every month as a reminder of if we can make it through that in that awful period of our lives, we can make it through anything. But the only way we truly made it through was Jesus and getting back into church and relationship and connection. And like, that's one thing I asked him. I was like, what do we need to do to make this better? And at first, Cole being Colavit was like, I'll deal with it myself. That's literally what he told me. And I was like, we see how well that worked. No. What can we do? And then he was like, well, I don't really know. I've never had to think of it this way. I've always had to do it by myself. What do you think? And so honestly, I'm like, that's why church is important, because I'm like, I always think about if the pandemic had not happened, would he have had to go through everything he went through alone? Do you have anything to say? I feel like I've done most of talking, and this is mostly about you.
That's how it goes.
Do you have anything to say?
Like I said earlier, just don't let it become something that you have to do, or you feel like something will be wrong if you don't do it. It needs to be something that you want to do. It's a relationship that you want to have, that you want to grow, that you want to get deeper in and make better. Because the better your relationship is with God, the better yourself will be. Like, the closer to God I have been, the happier I've been. I mean, the further I get from him, it gets real dark real quick. But now I have a little ball of sunshine.
Yeah, so get connected, get in church, get in your Bible, pray, give, serve, do it all, and just make it a relationship and don't make it a requirement.
Make it be something you want to do.
And church is important. Get in it. Don't just say, hey, I'm at the house worshiping, I can do it here.
Okay, look, real quick. It's okay if it starts out that way, just to get you in the door. But then meet some people, make some friends, make you something you want to do.
Yep.